Welcome to this DVD. You're about to learn some extremely simple coin magic, although it doesn't mean it's easy. This stuff will require practice, and if you put the effort in, you'll have some extremely powerful effects. You'll have metal switch, a 2-coin transposition, or the classic copper-silver transposition, primary movement, which is one of my favorite teleportations of a coin, and the pocket time machine, which is a trick which rebrands what a coin vanish can be. There's also the SDS vanish, which is one of the most psychological coin vanishes you'll ever come across. This represents some of my favorite coin material, and if you put the time in, you'll have some really, really deceptive effects. James, I want to show you a very, very simple thing. It's probably one of the oldest tricks in all of magic, and definitely one of the simplest things I know. It just involves a coin. Nothing else. Do me a favour, hold me on the wrist, but deep at the back of the wrist. The other one, do the same. Okay. Told you it was simple. Not bad. This is the explanation for primary movement. I've always been really interested in the idea of a coin simply traveling from one hand to the other. Really, really simple, and it's often a trick that magicians throw away. But I really wanted to make it an impactful moment. So I tried to focus on how can I make it really believable and really powerful of a coin traveling from one hand to the other. And there are a number of touches and techniques that make that just that bit more deceptive and just that bit more entertaining. So it obviously starts with a coin. Any coin, a borrowed coin, that's it. But before you begin, you need to make it apparent that your hands are empty. So I don't necessarily display that my hands are empty, I just allow them to be seen empty as I either borrow a coin from someone on my left or remove it from a pocket. But the key moment to remember here is that I never have the coin in this hand. I don't take a coin out of my right pocket and transfer it over, and I don't want to borrow a coin from someone on my right and transfer it over. Even though it's very clean and no moves are happening, I don't want the coin to ever have existed here. So I make sure that this is allowed to be seen empty, and I either borrow the coin or take the coin from this side, and it's very, very obvious, very clear where the coin is. That moment alone took me many years to realize how important it is, and it really does change the clarity of the narrative of the effect. So once I have the coin here, now what I have to do is I have to very, very slowly close my hand. And I want it to be clean, that nothing funny is happening, but I don't want to, again, bring too much attention to it, because if you come in like this and very clearly do it, it suggests that something is going to happen, and it increases the vigilance on this moment. So you have to kind of split the difference. You have to kind of allow it to obviously be in the hand, but do it just enough so it's clear and not make too much of a moment, okay? So once that's done, now what's going to happen is I'm going to turn my hand down and ask someone to hold me on the wrist. And I'm going to execute a steal that can be found in Bobo. It's the Bill Simon Gone Vanish. And in essence, I'm going to come under this left wrist and steal the coin, or essentially ditch the coin into my right hand. But there are a number of little touches that you can do to actually make that a bit more deceptive. What I tend to do is I say this: would you do me a favor, would you hold me on the wrist? Yeah, that's it, just deep at the back. And in that moment, we've stolen the coin. Now what I'm doing here is hesitating. Instead of just going straight in and saying, would you hold me on the wrist, and ditching the coin, I'm hesitating. And the reason is because if you ask someone to hold you on the wrist, you don't necessarily need to demonstrate. The words have already made it clear. Would you hold me on the wrist? So what I tend to do is I tend to make it feel like they are hesitating with what to do. So I say, well, look, would you hold me on the wrist? Yeah, deep at the back. It just feels like that extra movement is there to clarify what's happening. Now, there's a little point with how we actually maneuver this coin before we go into the mechanics of the ditch. What happens is, as I close my hand and turn it down, and bearing in mind the whole time this hand has been seen to be empty, all I do is I allow the weight of this coin to just rest on the fingertips, and then I just come up to this fleshy part at the base of the thumb. I just kind of leave it there and just maybe push it out to an edge, and it basically exists somewhere around here. It's somewhere around this position here. It might change dependent on your angles, but I mean it's very flat. It's just been resting here. And again, as I close, as I turn the hand down, I just allow the weight of that coin to drop onto my fingertips. So like this, I turn the hand down, and it's resting on the fingertips, and I just kind of push my fingertips back a bit. And if you look at that at full speed, you don't really see any movement. So I close this hand, I say, look, would you do me a favor? And it's done. And that movement of my hand, it's at this position. Would you mind helping me? Would you hold me on the wrist? I gesture. Now the right hand has to steal this coin, or more accurately, the coin is probably ditched from this left hand into this right hand. And what I'm trying to do is get the coin to land in this position here. Now, it doesn't matter if it doesn't fall exactly into that position. You can adjust it, and I'll go over some of those tips in a moment. But what you want to try and practice is the ability to ditch the coin into that position. Fall straight into that position. Now, what's happening as well is, as I do this, I say, would you mind holding me on the wrist? Yeah, not too close, that's a bit further back. My hand's still very light. It's not gripping tight, it's not coming in close, it's very, very light. Now, this is covered from almost all angles. It's covered from my far left side by the curling of my fingers, it's covered from the right side, and it's pretty much covered entirely from above because of my hand. So I can afford to be very light here. So again, would you mind holding me on the wrist? Yeah, that's it, all the way at the back. Very, very quick, and yet that coin has fallen into that position. It's very, very light. And now the moment that they actually hold the wrist, this hand simply comes back and relaxes. You're not trying to move away quickly. You're not trying to disguise anything. You just relax the hand. The natural relaxing of the hand will cover the coin. Now, if you've managed to drop it into this position, what you're going to essentially do is squeeze these fingers either side and put it into a purse palm. And that happens as you naturally relax the hand. It is in that position. Now, if, as I said, if you don't quite drop it in that position, if when you come up, it kind of moves up here, then as you come back and relax, so let's imagine it's here, as you come back and relax, the natural closing of the fingers will pull that down into that position. So really, you want to make sure it's on this finger. Now, if it's somewhere like this, you can still maneuver it. Sometimes what you might have to do is drop the hand for a second and allow the weight of the dropping of the hand to put it in position. But making sure if you do ever do that, and you say, no, just hold me on the wrist, yep, that's it, that's perfect, great. And then it comes back up. And if it does drop, make sure the hand swings. That's very, very natural looking. That's what a hand does when it drops. So just very quickly to go over that again, we close, we allow the coin to be on the fingertips, we push it backwards. I say, would you mind holding me on the wrist? That's it, but a bit further back. All this is very, very light, it's falling into that position. The hand relaxes, and they hold the wrist. The moment they hold this wrist, I just pop the knuckles like this, just slightly. And what it does is it does two things. First of all, visually, you can see that very, very close up. You can see it from across the room. Because all the focus is here, that knuckle pop will register, and that suggests the presence of a coin. What's interesting is that the person holding your wrist will feel the tendons in your wrist move, and it gives a kinesthetic sensation to this, well, it essentially confirms what they think or what they can see. They think and they see a coin is there, they've held the wrist, and this slight movement of the knuckles, which they can also see, they have this feeling of your tendons moving. It's a very, very subtle little technique which really makes it feel that that coin is in the left hand. It convinces them that it's there without you having to say anything. You're doing it through a tiny amount of movement and the fact they can feel tendons moving. I love that moment. So you come in here like this, with your hand holding the wrist, you relax. The moment that they are holding you on that wrist, you shift your attention. This is being squeezed into a purse palm here, that relaxation. You shift your attention over, you look over to your right. Now this is if you're doing it with two people. I will also talk through doing this with one person. We'll do that at the end. Let's imagine for now I've got one person on my left and one person on my right. So this person holds here, I shift my attention over, and I'm not looking at my hand, I'm looking at them, and I move this hand up and say, would you do the same? And I take my attention off immediately. Now, this hand is flat, and I'm not paying any attention to it. And all of my body language and attention seems to be over this way. So holding the wrist, that's it, a bit further back, great. And would you mind holding this wrist? Thank you. It feels like none of my attention is over on this side. I don't really care. I immediately shift my attention back to my left hand. Now, sometimes even you can see here, my body language is biasing. You know, this hand's further away, and this hand's closer a bit. So it feels like all of my attention is here. And at this moment, once this person has my wrist and this person has my wrist, I tend to adjust myself in the middle, and at some stage I do another small knuckle pop. Either my knuckle moves or I might adjust something with this hand. Now, if you think about that, this hand is closed, apparently containing something, and there's movement, and my attention is here. Everything in this effect is forcing you to believe that which you think is what you already know, which is the fact that there is a coin there. And there doesn't seem to be anything else that's happened. My attention is away from this, and this hand is flat. It doesn't feel like a coin could be held in this hand. Now, once in this moment, what I'm going to do is I stay there for a split second, and I just wait. And I wait until I can feel that moment where the tension builds enough for the spectators to say, well, what's going to happen? And it's in that moment that we do this, and we reverse the conditions. So this hand goes flat, and this hand closes. Now, part of the idea of this, when initially trying to play with a coin going from one hand to the other, was how I could get away from the idea of having a coin travel, and then the only time you know it's actually gone across is the moment where you see it gone. Okay, I suppose it must be here. What I wanted to do was have that moment actually happen visually before the coin is shown. So from this position, that tells you something's happened. So there's a beat before you even need to show that coin. This suggests emptiness, this suggests somethingness. So now, very, very slowly, again, allow that tension to build, and you can either talk to them and say, just take your hand away, or you just slowly start turning. They see. Shift your attention over here, you slowly start turning, and they see. And that's primary movement. Now, there are a couple of touches that I want to go through. How do you do this for a single person? It's essentially the same. The only difference is the way in which you're interacting with the spectator. Because on a stage or in a bigger environment, in a parlor setting, up here, this hand can relax. So if you've come up and stolen the coin, all of your attention is over here, this is relaxed to here, and then you move across like this person holds. It's very, very clean and easy, but when you're doing it for one person, there's just a person in front of you, it's not quite the same. So what you need to do is when you take the coin here, you do the same thing. Would you hold me on the wrist? Their right hand comes up and holds you on the wrist, and as soon as you've done this, you immediately just pop out to here. You don't wait, you just, as soon as you've stolen this coin, you come like this, you immediately pop out and say, would you do the same with this one as well? Great. Now, once you do that, you then slowly start, you still do the knuckle pop, you slowly start separating your hands, just to bring them a little bit wider. And you leave it to about there. Because for one person, you can't have this width. It's weird if you start doing this immediately. On a stage, when you've got this and this, you get that width naturally by getting them to hold your wrists. Whereas for one person, it feels weird if you suddenly say, hold this wrist. So you just immediately come up into this space. And once they hold your wrists, you can then start moving apart very, very slowly and execute that knuckle pop. Not very much, get to about there. Then you do exactly the same thing. And then turn, and then turn. There's another tiny little thing I want to mention with arm movement. And that is when doing this in a larger setting, when you've stolen this coin, you can, and it's useful, like I said, if you actually drop the coin into the wrong position, but anyway, you can allow this hand to swing. Because you're saying to them, would you do me a favor? Would you hold me on the wrist? Yep, that's it. Deep at the back. Great, thank you. And it feels that all of the attention is on this wrist. Now you can say, would you hold this wrist? Great. Now you can't really do that one-on-one with someone. You can't drop that hand because it doesn't feel right. The movement feels wrong. So when in here, in this situation, you've done this steal, if you drop this hand and then immediately come up for them, it feels very odd. So when doing it one-on-one, it always just relaxes and comes out. It doesn't drop. Like I said, on a stage, you can still relax and shift over, but if they're taking a little bit of time when they're holding a wrist, it's also just as permissible to drop the hand, relax, and come up. You then, like I said before, whether it's for one person or on a stage, take your time, do a knuckle pop, enjoy that moment because you're so far ahead. Bang. Show here. And show here. The coin was only ever here in the beginning. It was borrowed on this side. It only ever existed there. And then with nothing, it appears to have gone straight across to the other hand. That's primary movement. One final thing, there was a technique I came across of slidinis, and it was very interesting. You would simply show both hands front and back, and yet you're concealing a coin. It's a very, very tiny little touch, a little subtlety that I think used at the right moment is very interesting, and you create the impression that you've seen the hands front and back. And the reality is you're showing the back of the right hand twice. You're doing this and this. And done very quickly and very casually, you can just create the impression that both hands have been seen front and back. It's a very, very nice little subtlety, and so I constructed this routine to, in a way, create a similar impression. So I want people to feel that they've seen this hand totally empty, even up until the final moment. And that's why at the beginning I say allow this hand to be seen empty. I don't display it and show it, they just know it's empty. And because of the naturalness of this steal, when going up to this position, the fact that it's face down and you're in purse palm, it also confirms the fact that it's empty. Gravity would make that coin fall if there was a coin there. So it feels empty. And the symbols that these hands are creating also confirm that. Nothing, there's nothing here, the hand's open and empty, this has got something in it. And so I want that feeling to be carried through in the technique and the choreography. And that's when we swap this condition, now this has nothing, and then they see this condition, and they see this condition. And basically, throughout that process, they just really get that clarity of the hands being empty, a coin being here, someone holding it, this hand being empty. Often people will really feel that I did this for them first. So I've done this for magicians before, and they've sworn blind that they saw me holding my hand palm up just before I turned over, and there was nothing in it. And it's because of the choreography and the fairness of this effect that it really creates a similar impression to that old slidini subtlety. Okay, James, I'm going to do this, hold your hand out completely flat. I'm going to do this above your hand, but we need, in fact, we put your fingers together like this. This is really, really simple. All I need is the loan of your hand. We're going to hold this above from here. There we go. Watch.
boom.
This is the explanation for the SDS vanish. Now, I always like the idea of just making a coin vanish in the style of Max Malini, where you didn't have to go into any other large routine, you just took a coin and made it vanish. It's one of the purest magic effects you can do, and I think often it's, again, just a throwaway thing that a lot of magicians will just mess about with. But I wanted to try and make something bigger, make something just that little bit more magical. And so this has been constructed to be as fooling as possible for a spectator. Now, there are some angle issues with this, but if you're doing this one-on-one, it's perfect. And you can do this with small groups, but it's very difficult to do entirely surrounded. That said, I have done this entirely surrounded and had nobody spot what's happened. There's just a weird psychological quirk that sometimes happens where they project a coin that isn't really there into your hands. I'll get into that in a moment. So all that's going to happen is you're going to ask them to hold their hand out. Okay? Now, as long as their hand's in the right position, you're going to throw to the other hand, grip the edge, revolve it down, grip the edge here, and then slowly squeeze that into nothing. And all that's happening is you're going to ditch the coin into your pocket. Now, it depends what you're wearing and how you do that. If you want to have something cleaner, you could use a magnetic coin and ditch it as your hand drops. There are many ways that you could actually get rid of the coin. But what we're going to do is make that moment really, really casual by creating the impression that all I'm going to do is hold this coin above their hand. I'm creating the idea that I'm going to do this. And when you come and take this, this moment is crucial. It's absolutely crucial that they see a clear moment where no coin is in the right hand, this hand is closed, and there is space between the right hand and the left hand. That moment. Now, you're not displaying it, you just make sure it happens. If you make sure it happens, that's as much time as you need. If you think about trying to display it, you'll stay there for too long and it will look weird. So when you actually take the coin, you just make sure you come to this position. Now what's going to happen is, I'll explain the movement of the right hand first. As the right hand comes forward, it's just going to move and release pressure and drop this coin. I'm not going to move the fingers very much. It's just going to drop very like that. It stays and just drops that coin. Just releasing pressure like this. And it does that as it moves forward. So it moves forward and releases pressure. That's timed at the same moment that this hand, the left hand, relaxes. I don't try and catch the coin, I just relax back. And in relaxing back and this coming forward, they cross. And what's going to happen is this coin will be dropped to roughly this area. So from here, you come forward and it's dropped into the hand. Now there are different ways you can do it. You can rotate the hand outwards and do it. But in effect, you're just relaxing. The key is relaxing the hand, not trying to pull it back and move that forward. You just, I mean, you basically imagine you're not doing a move. If you pick this up and put your hand out, you know, pick that up and put your hand out, that just goes directly forward and this hand relaxes. All you just make sure is that they cross paths at that moment. So you do this, and then that's been ditched into this hand. It's a really, really beautiful move. It's soft, it's deceptive, and it doesn't really seem to be a move. It just seems that you pick a coin up and hand it off. It's beautiful. Now, I do a slightly different form of that, which is related to the Fred Robinson vanish, it's related to Slidini work, it's related to the Divernon one spin, a move by a friend of mine called Kevin Baker. There are many, many similar styled moves, this idea of dropping and timing a motion. Like the Vernon one spin is like that, where you're dropping an object from the hand as your other hand passes underneath. So I try to create a similar impression with this coin vanish, where I hold it here so it's clean and out in the open. And what I like about this particular version of using it is that it never appears, I didn't pick it up from another hand and pass it over. It just appears that this was always out in that space. So in order for me to ditch it, I need to say to them, oh, would you hold your hand out for me? And then I do it. So it feels that coin was always here. I relax and I come back. I ditch, then we go into the routine. But they're essentially, the moment of the ditch is identical The only difference is this burn that you get in the Fred Robinson vanish, and then what I'm doing is I'm leaving it out in space, turning, gesturing, and doing exactly the same thing. Now, there are small touches you can also use by just adjusting the coin. So you can come here, do this, just adjust the coin. There are lots of ways you can do this, lots of little touches, but essentially it's just about relaxing this left hand and allowing a soft drop and allowing your body language to relax with the move. And hold this one hand in. So my body weight relaxes back onto my back foot and I lean and just slowly make that blink out of existence. That is what I imagine I'm about to do. And in doing that, it allows my body language to be congruent with that type of movement. In the sense, I'm going to pick this up and just hold it above the hand. If you do that, look at how my body is going to relax back, my head's dropping slightly, and my weight's going onto my back leg, and my arm drops like this. It feels like the whole effect is going to be out here. And so what happens is I do exactly that. I hold this out here, you put your hand out, and then I ditch the coin, and I come back out. So to do it like this, I take this like this, and again I do this ditch. So I come over like this, ditch the coin, and then I start, and my body just starts affecting that body language. I come out like this, and my whole body just relaxes back as if I'm going to do this with one coin, and my hand just goes into my pocket. Now the moment that their hand comes out, I come out and adjust their hand. So no, adjust, that's it, that's about right. So now that moment completely disappears. There's a reason for your hand to come out of the pocket, and it really doesn't feel that coin has gone anywhere. So this moment here, I then throw nothingness across to this hand. So I do this, and I adjust it here. The reason for that is now they've got a visual of the coin. Let's do this again. They've seen the coin. I've come out like this. So I've done that drop. I'm exposing it here. So I'm dropping this back in like this. I've held this out. So they've seen that coin. I've then come out and adjusted it. Now, when I throw, not only will they often experience an expectation-based hallucination where they will see something move across, this coin now has inertia. There is now movement. So at this position I hold here, I will sometimes just bounce, adjust that coin in my hand slightly, or a parent coin, there is nothing. Then up here, once I'm here, I then come across like this and grab the extreme or apparent extreme edge of this coin. When I do that, I then take this thumb off. Now from behind, I'll turn around slowly so you can see this. From behind, all I'm doing is I am grabbing like this and taking that thumb off and doing this. Now from the front, if you put your hand out again, that moment causes them to simulate the coin in this plane. So they imagine that that coin is in that particular plane. Just that moment there makes them do that. Before this moment, they've seen the coin, we've come up, we've come out, the coin has got a visual, then it's got momentum, but they're not thinking about any particular orientation, they're just thinking about their hand. It's when you get to here that they now know the orientation of that coin. They're not consciously thinking all this stuff. This is causing them to do that instantaneously, psychologically. Once we're in this position and I've done this, now what happens is I come in like this, and I rotate both hands forward like this. And then I take this hand away, keeping my thumb and my fingers in this position. This is entirely blocked from their perspective. I can't see anything. Now what this causes them to do is simulate the coin in this plane. So now what they've done is they have mentally simulated the coin in two physical planes. A non-existent object has been simulated in two physical planes. When this vanishes, it's extremely difficult for them to imagine that the coin has gone because they feel the presence of that object. So here, let's run through that again very quickly just from this section here. I come here like this, that thumb raises, I come like this, turn over. Now when this hand comes away, I then come back in and grip the edge. And when I do that, they understand that I'm now gripping the edge of a coin. They're again creating another physical property of that coin. The coin has edges. The coin has visual stimulus. The coin has movement. The coin has a particular plane. The coin has another physical plane. The coin has another physical property. It has a boundary. It has an edge. And all of this is happening without words. You're causing them to do this through the movement of your hands and the way in which you are interacting with them. Once you're here, you then hold that edge and you focus your attention, absolutely focus your attention on to this moment. In my mind, I genuinely can see that coin. I can see that coin between my fingertips and I can see that edge. And I really focus and I imagine and I see that crushing down, right down between my fingertips. And then once we get to this position here, but you'll remember, you don't want to rush this point. They really believe that coin is there. So every single time you're here, they're just thinking, where is it? It's too small. Is it behind the fingers? I can't quite see it yet. So you want to extend that for as much as possible until you finally can come away like this. And you've just made a coin vanish essentially in slow motion, barehanded, above their hands. It's an extremely magical moment for them, extremely powerful. Now, there's one other technique I want to go over with how to make this coin vanish. Instead of using this the pickup vanish by Fred Robinson, we're going to use a slightly different technique. And this is like this. You ask them to hold their hand out flat, and you basically go into exactly the same thing. Okay? And you're already ahead and you've ditched this coin. What's happening is this. It's the same motion, the same ditching motion here, but all that's happening this time is I come out like this and I allow them to see that coin right out in the open. I turn like this. Now, at this moment, they don't know what this means. If you stay here too long and do this and gesture at them, it'll make them hold their hand out. I don't do that. I just come into their space, turn around, and then I say, would you hold your hand out for me? And I just, in doing that, if we put this down for a second, when I say, would you hold your hand out for me? All I'm doing is just subtly retreating just a bit as this comes forward. And now, when you come forward like this, you're in the same position you are when you do this pickup vanish. So you do this. Would you hold your hand out for me? And that coin is gone. And the same thing, as soon as they're doing that, you just hold like this, relax, ditch that coin. Actually, let's move the hand a bit closer in. That's perfect. There we go. Here like this. And all of these movements are designed to create the existence, or apparent existence, of what is in fact a non-existent object. Now, one final thing I will mention on this, I said at the beginning about doing this surrounded. Even though if you're doing this for one person, the angles are perfect. They're not going to see anything, everything is covered, and it's designed to absolutely make it appear that a coin blinks out of existence for an individual. But your angles are better than you imagine. If you hold your hand out again for me, all of this is covered from the back. This is all covered, so anyone out here is fine. Once you get to here, you're still covered here. Now, at this point here, you've probably got like a 45-degree angle, something like, or maybe it's 90 degrees if we're going out of my 45s, but you've got not a bad angle. The weird thing that happens is, because you've created the existence of this and it's so strong, often what can happen when you come into this space, people even from the sides feel that the coin is under their line of perspective. So if they're looking from here, sometimes they still feel that the coin is there. It's bizarre. I've done this for one person before with people on my sides, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And the people on my sides were just as freaked out. So I think that there are some interesting psychological things going on, because the conviction is so strong that a coin is present and is above their hands, and there is nothing else in play. It's a barehanded coin vanish. It's one of my favorites. That's the SDS vanish. Here I want to share some tips and touches with the false toss concept within coin magic as a vanish, or you can use it as a switch. The idea being that you apparently throw the coin from one hand to the other. Now, often when I see this done, it's normally the over-exaggerated, or a lot of the time people don't like using it because it feels like there's a space between the hands. By that I mean you simply throw a coin from one hand to the other and don't. People like to keep it much more closed and tight, but I just have some tips and techniques. Now, there are lots of stuff. There's Goshman, Ramsey, Slidini. There are lots of people that have these types of vanishes, but I'm just going to show you some little touches that I have with them. What it really comes down to is the movement between both hands. It's often difficult for people to choreograph the movement, but you have like a fluid movement between both hands where it feels like this. It doesn't feel like a judder from one to the other. It feels like a fluid transition. And then when the coin apparently goes into the hand, I normally have a couple of little bounces or touches, or I keep the hand quite open and quite soft. I'm just allowing my hand to be a hand. I'm just allowing it to relax. I'm not trying to cover the coin. I'm not trying to be tense or anything. I'm just being very open and very relaxed with the movements. Now, those same touches and tactics can be used for even just throwing it across at apparent speed and still doing nothing. And this time using a classic palm. So in this case, it's going up into a classic palm. So I'm rotating my hand around, moving it into a classic palm, and throwing it into the hand. Now, I'm not using any over-exaggerated move, but I'm just throwing it across. Now, if you notice, the hand is breaking a little bit. The hand that's receiving the coin is breaking a bit, and then I'm adjusting. Now, if you do those things together, you can really create the impression that a coin goes across. And you can do Goshman style, apparently throw that from one hand to the other. There are lots of ways that you can do it, and it really feels like a coin is going across. You can also do it from a purse palm that we did before, where it just feels like you toss that coin into the left hand. And now that is in purse palm. Gripping here and just throwing across, keeping a hold of that coin. So whether you're using purse palm or classic palm, or you're just doing it in almost a finger palm here and just allowing it to come off, or you're kind of using a ledge, I suppose, but whatever technique it is you're doing, the hands are still moving in the same way. There's a relaxation, that weight is dropping into that hand. The hard part with all of these moves, I think, and I'm still constantly working on them and trying to refine them, the hard part is not over-simulating. It's often there's too much of a move. You have to get the balance just right, where it doesn't feel too fluid and too refined. It doesn't feel too over-simulated. You just want to get it to the point where it just feels natural. It's unlike a lot of moves where you're taking a coin at the fingertips or placing it in. There's an inherent relaxation in these moves, which is really deceptive. So I'm just trying to share some tips with you about that. It's more about mime and softness. I mean, one of the main things you have to do is imagine what it's really like. If you throw a coin, it's very difficult to not have some breaking movement here. This hand does immediately retract and retreat, be relaxed. So you have to allow that to inform the same technique when you're actually doing, or apparently doing the move. I think it's one of the best concepts for a coin vanish in Magic in terms of throwing nothing. It's so elegant, it's so simple. And like I said, I don't necessarily tend to prescribe or use one particular technique over another. If I use it, it's kind of a mishmash of all of them. Wherever the coin is in my hand, sometimes I'll use the purse palm to apparently throw that coin across. Sometimes I'll use a classic palm. You can also do it downwards, so you don't have to throw it across. You can pick the coin up and just drop it. There's lots of ways, like I said, tip or throw. I allow all of those techniques to almost merge together. I think it's a beautiful technique, and if you get it right, you'll have an extremely powerful coin vanish. Okay, so we're going to play a game, a simple game with a coin. You're going to play along too. I have a 50p and you're going to use, let's go with a 2p piece. Hold your hand out for me, hold and tighten to this, but close up. The object is to get the coin from your hand into mine. Easy. You ready? Did you feel that? Okay, yeah, not yet. You feel that happen? You can be honest.
No.
Ah, there we go. The 2p is now mine. The difficult bit was getting my 50p into yours. Now your 2p has jumped to mine. The difficult bit was getting the 50 to jump to yours. this is the explanation of metal switch, my handling of the classic 2-coin transposition or the copper-silver transposition. I wanted to have an effect that was very, very clean, involved no duplicate coins or no gimmicks. Now, can I just bring you in for this, Andy, for a second? Very, very simple. Sorry, stay there a sec, that's it. Here's the idea, very, very simple. We're going to start by introducing this coin on its own. We're not bringing out the copper and the silver coin together, we're just introducing one object at a time. I think it just helps the clarity of the effect in terms of where the coin starts. Sometimes with transpositions, people forget where objects are. It's often easier for them to think they forgot the initial conditions than imagine that the object switched. And I think sometimes that's because both are introduced at the same time. So what I'm doing is I'm just introducing this object on its own. I think I first came across this in Ed Marlowe's Copsil routine. I think it's a very clever technique. There is another way to do it where you can introduce both, and I'll go over that at the end. For now, I introduce this coin. And I say, in this case, Andy, I'm going to show you something with a coin, but I want you to follow along. So I'm going to give you one as well. You can have a 2p piece. Now, just to break down that sequence so far, all that's happening is I've performed a false transfer of the coin. So you can use any false transfer you like. I tend to use something like this. You can use one with a purse palm, or you can use one with a classic palm. I tend to use a kind of a throw or a false toss type action because it feels really relaxed and casual. It doesn't feel that there's a moment where a move is happening, and it just kind of flows and works nicely. Now, in this particular case, I want to do something else. I want to not only do this and relax, but I'm for a moment creating the impression that this is a trick with one coin. So I'll do this, drop to here, I allow this hand to drop, I bounce this coin slightly, put my thumb on it, and say, I'm going to show you something. And so they feel that this is all about this coin. So they know that this is a 50p piece, but I want you to do this as well.
Talk us through this more, though. So it's not actually there, and you're bouncing it.
Yes. So it's hard to describe exactly. I just kind of improvise it, really. But once this is in this position, I do a number of things. I have a slight drop like this. Sometimes I put my thumb on it. Sometimes I'll kind of move it around. But my fingers move and this drops. There's not too much of it. And I don't think I do bounce, bounce, touch. I don't do that. I simply just, once this drops, and there's also this, as this comes like this, it's nicer maybe from this angle here, as opposed from the exposed angle, but once you get that drop, it really feels like a coin is there. You can temporarily put your hand over it, but I tend to like to keep it quite open, especially as at this moment the focus isn't on it. So
and then the false transfer itself,
it's
unusual.
In this case, it's like I suppose it's similar in a way to the John Ramsey favourite vanish, where it's up like this, similar to the Goshman like toss style vanish. But what I'm doing is I'm just throwing over, and this little finger is almost a ledge. So it won't fall. I'd have to go quite hard to allow that to flip off. It's just kind of balanced there. So as it comes down, I just tip. And I allow that momentum to carry on into this hand. So it just really feels like a natural moment. Very, very soft, very, very subtle, very open, very casual. At this moment, I say, I want you to do the same thing or something similar. So would you hold on to this? And I introduce a different coin. In this case, it's a 2p piece. So the contrast obviously helps the clarity of the effect. Now, I'll go over another way of switching this in a second. For now, I'll show you this. It's a very open method. And I use this if I feel that the spectator is very easy, and when I hand them the coin, they're just going to close their hand around. It's hard to describe how you know that, but you can sense with certain spectators that they will just close their hands. So I use this very open, casual technique, which I take this and say, do the same, just hold on tight for me, just squeeze your hand. It's very open, and in that moment, I've now switched that coin. They are holding onto the 50p, and I now have the 2. So to go on to this, again, I'm holding this after doing the false transfer. This is here. I take this out of my pocket. So you do the same, hold on tight, and I move this up into the thumb crotch here, and I do that by using a Roth technique, by pushing on the edge of the coin so it flips up into that type of position. So what I'm doing is squeezing on the edge of this coin, and it flips up, and there's a little bit of pressure upwards as both my thumb moves to close and my hands close, and it naturally goes into that position. It means it doesn't require a lot of extra movement. It just immediately goes up into that position.
The coin has to overhang over the fingers, right?
Well, it's just kind of, yes, sticking out of this position. So it's moving up like this. Otherwise, you'd have to bend these fingers all the way in. So just by tapping on that edge as it closes, it just goes straight into that position. It's securely held. And it's away from the other coin, so they're not going to talk at all. Now, in that moment, I say, would you hold on tight? And I just look at them, and I just drop this in and say, squeeze tight. And I immediately shift my attention. Now, the whole time, my hand's been out in this position, out in the open. And so it just feels like they're now holding onto this coin. We're relaxed, and now we're about to begin. So what I'm going to do at this point is create an apparent effect in their mind that never really happens. And what I mean by that is this. I say to them, now the object of the game is to get the coin from your hand into mine. And the reason I say that is because magicians understand that with a transposition, we understand that both will change. At this moment, the spectator will think, well, I'm going to therefore open my hand and there'll be none, and he will open his hand and there'll be two. That is the effect you're creating when you say the object of the game is to get the coin from your hand into mine. They sit there and think, well, good luck, because I can still feel it. Now, in that moment, they are also, when they're thinking to themselves, no, I can still feel it, they are creating the existence of apparently the coin that they think they're holding. So they're just reaffirming the existence of that coin. The object of the game is to get the coin from your hand into mine. You ready? We start there. There's a similar idea, I think, published by Harvey Rosenthal, which again involves this idea about controlling what they're thinking. And it's a very useful technique, and it makes it very powerful psychologically, because they also don't know what to expect, and it takes the kind of idea of the ending of the effect away from them at this moment. So I relax and I wait, and I say to them, can you feel that yet?
No.
Now, depending on what they say will depend on how I then perform the next move. You've got to remember, this hand has been out in the open the entire time, isolated, from that very first moment where they believe that 50p was put inside. It's not really been. I purposely make it slightly awkward and keep it away. So that if he says no, what I do is this. Really? Okay, yeah, you're right. I'll use that moment. If he says yes, I do the same thing. Really? Already? Okay. You just use that moment to execute this load. What I'm going to do is drop the coin from this hand. When my hand is relaxed down here, I've just put it on the fingertips or somewhere in the hand. You can put it into a classic palm if you like, but the fingertips are just as good. It doesn't matter, as long as it goes somewhere in the hand which is roughly casual and relaxed. And all I'm going to do is apparently be looking inside and peeking and checking my coin. And in that moment, what I'm going to do is come over and drop the coin. So if you have the coin in classic palm, this means that you can load the coin by dropping it from the classic palm position. So when I come over, I'm going to drop it onto my fingertips. So I'm going to drop it onto the fingertips. Now, if you don't and you have it at the fingers, it's the similar technique. You just come over and check and drop it from there. It doesn't really matter. I tend to use the classic palm. When I've done the switch and my hand drops, I move it into a classic palm position. I tend to do that, just so the fingers can be a bit more relaxed. So whatever their response is, can you feel something yet? Yes, you can. I use that movement to this hand comes up and this hand opens and they meet like this. And as I do this, my body moves back. So I move my entire body back and apparently peek inside. Well, I am peeking inside. I'm just doing something else. They think I'm just checking a coin. In reality, I'm loading a coin in. So it looks like this. Can you feel something? They say yes or no, and I come up and I check. And my body, it's like I'm looking inside. I'm just loading it. And I come back to that same position that it's apparently been occupying the whole way through the effect. And I relax. We then wait a few beats. This moment here like this. Ah, there it is. And they're still thinking at this moment, hang on, this can't be. I can still feel the coin. There's no way the coin can be in your hand. They expect to have an empty hand and I will have two. So I say, yep, your coin has traveled to mine. The difficult bit was getting mine into yours. And that is the moment where they understand the effect. And they end with that moment. Very, very clean. Everything is open and there are no duplicates. Now, very quickly, I said I'd run through what would happen if you introduce both. You can do it that way, and I have done it that way. If you do this at the beginning, you bring these out, and you can say, right, I want to show you something. I'll use this one, use the 50p, use the other one. I want you to do exactly the same thing as me. So hold on tight to this coin. So squeeze tight for me. Now I'm doing this exposed so that you can see, but there you'll see that we've introduced both, and I've also used a different switch technique. So these are both out. You could even ask them to choose one. Which one do you want?
I'll take the 2p.
You want the 2p piece? Okay, I'll have the 50. All I want you to do with this is squeeze tight like I am, but don't kind of do it too tight, just keep it out in the open, whatever you like.
Okay.
I'm kind of improvising around those moments and those techniques, using slightly different switches and stuff so that you can see them. But all that's happening is you're just leaving them up there and using that moment. Now, I tend not to do it that way. I tend to introduce one and then use another one, but you can quite easily do it this way. So it's exactly the same. You can do a move, bounce, come up here, so just squeeze like me, and then do the same thing where you're knocking that in and dropping this one out. Now, the other switch you can do is a palm switch, or classic palm switch, where you have one in classic palm. So let's imagine I've taken this, thrown this coin, keeping it in classic palm. These are slightly different techniques, but the structure is exactly the same. I'm just performing a vanish. So in this case, if I use the classic palm in order to effect a false toss, I can then come over and now do a palm switch and drop this into their hand. And the palm switch is here. We pick this up. Now what's happening here is you have the coin in classic palm. The one in classic palm is going to drop down to the base of the fingers as this gets pushed up into the 2p piece here, is getting pushed up into the classic palm. And this, I believe, is a palm switch by Presto. So classic palm to classic palm switch, palm to palm switch. And you disguise this by saying, would you do the same as me? Would you hold on tight to that coin? And in that moment, you have executed half of that technique. And then when we come out, we execute the rest. I'll break that down for you. So when this comes out now, that's very clean. Now in this case, because of this particular switch, when you put this down, you can use the fingers on the backs of their hands to roll their hand over and get them to close, or you can just say, would you hold on tight to the coin? And if you place it at the very base of their fingers here, it often forces them to close a bit quicker. If you place it here, it might feel uncomfortable and they might feel the need to adjust, but if you say, would you just hold on tight to that coin, it forces them to close. So you can do that. Now often, like I said before, if I'm doing a different palm switch and I do this, then I just drop it here and I block this. But I tend to be very casual with this moment, because the more you try to cover it, the more it might seem suspicious. So I tend to just go, just hold on tight for me so we can do this together. Sometimes I have it so open and I just maintain eye contact as I've started looking over here, and they just close their hand. But in full speed, as you say, would you do me a favor, hold on tight for me, just close your hand around that coin. They just close. You have to judge how open you can be dependent on the spectator. That's definitely the way if I use the other switch technique I was telling you about, where I'm just dropping, using the thumb palm and dropping it in. So you can do the same thing, although when you drop it does cover in a weird way, because as you come in, you can say just close on tight and hold onto the coin. Okay? So those are just some little extra tips and techniques for how to actually switch the coin in that moment. And then once you're in that position, you're almost home free. All you have to do is then load that coin into the hand using the loading technique, having a look, coming back, and then you're almost there. That's metal switch. Here are a couple of switches that you might like: the hips switch and the no touch switch. First of all, I'll talk through the hips switch. And HIPS stands for hiding in plain sight. The idea is very simple. You take the coin from someone and you say, you know that old game where you put the coin in your hands but you do it behind your back, and then you switch the coin from one hand to the other and you have to guess which hand it's in? We're going to play that. Please take this. And in that moment you switch the coin one for the other. Right out in the open with nothing to do, with having to really think about technique. You just hold the coin in this hand, take the coin from them. So you know that game where you're holding a coin in one of your hands but behind your back. And all you're doing here is you place the coin openly into or inside tightly into a classic palm position, and you apparently openly in front of them just switch it into the other hand. You're not trying to do something that really looks fair, you just do a movement like this. If you do that, it really feels that you've put the coin across, and it's congruent with the idea of just switching a coin behind their back. So very simple. You know that old game where you hold both of your hands behind your back with a coin and then you switch the coin around and you have to guess which hand it's in? We're going to play that. It just doesn't really feel that there was ever a moment where a switch could take place. In fact, you're almost kind of allowing them to cancel out the switch by them just following where the coin is. I love it. It's really simple and really open. There are different ways you can use it. You can use it in a different way if you're not playing that game. You could say to someone, right, take the coin. Now, it's really important as we go along that you follow what's happening. I don't want you to think anytime that you can't see the coin that I might switch it to another hand or do something funny. So instead, I want you to not take your eye off this coin at any moment. You can do it right out in the open. That's why I call it the hiding in plain sight switch. You're doing the switch right in front of them, but they cancel out the fact that it's a switch. Now, I used to also do this by putting my hands behind my back. I used to say, this is really cheeky. I'd have the coin to switch ready here, take this from them, and say, we're going to play this game. You know the game where you put the hands behind your back and then you switch the coin to the other hand or back and forth and I have to guess which hand it's in? We're going to play that. You're not even doing anything behind your back. You're just literally coming out with the other coin. Now, this is useful if you want to swap one coin like for like, a folding coin or some other gaffed coin or a coin we already previously know the date. But I just like the idea of being able to do something right out in the open by referencing it, and in that you just cancel out that switch. Thought it's something you might like. This is a different switch called the no-touch switch. Now, the no-touch switch is you take a coin from someone and apparently just pick it up at the other fingertips. Now, there are many things similar to this in a way. If you look at a lot of classic coin magic, you are essentially coming down on top and picking up this coin, but there are a couple of little touches that I think make this just that bit more deceptive. And what it is that you take the coin in this hand, and just as you're coming into this space, you bounce the coin, just for a second. And in the space where you bounce the coin, you come in with this hand and do a little tap. You don't actually touch anything. So you take the coin from them, tap, and come up. You're not apparently throwing it to the other hand, you're just taking it like this, and at that moment you do a tap, you look up at that exact moment as you come out. Okay, I just call it the no-touch switch. I've used it for years. My hands barely touch each other, and it's not necessarily designed to be burned. It just doesn't really feel like a switch. I prefer it to the type of normal shuttle pass type motions where the hands both rotate. It just feels like a coin is passed from one hand to the other. So the coin comes in, you bounce it. I also tend to look down at the coin, so it comes in like this, I bounce it, look up, and pass it out. You can sometimes also do this, bounce it, pick it up, put it back in the hand, carry on gesturing, and then take it out. Okay, I call it the no-touch switch. Extremely simple, but again, it uses those ideas of softness and relaxation. I just thought those are two switch techniques that you might enjoy. Right, I'm going to show you something with the concept of time, okay? Obviously not time itself, just the concept of time, and about nothingness. All right, this is going to feel weird for a bit, but just stick with it and you'll see what I mean. So we're going to start from this position here, right? Just nothingness. Just nothing happening. I'm going to close my hand, I'm going to turn it down, and I want you to hold me on the wrist. Right? That's it. It's the only moment you have to remember. Just the moment of nothingness, that's it. Quite easy to remember. All right, that's it, done. It's weird, right? But this is going to have more meaning in a second, watch. If we take a coin, okay, do exactly the same thing, hold me deep, just as you did. We're going to go back to that moment of nothingness, try and go completely back, okay? But if we were to really go back to that moment of nothingness, we'd have to be in a position where there was no coin. Yeah, there wouldn't be one. It'll be back in the pocket. We'd have to be in a position where it just wasn't here. We'd have to go back to the point where it started somewhere in my pocket. It's just a trick with nothing. It's just a concept, just conceptual. So it's really good. This is the explanation for pocket time machine. It's one of my favorite things to perform on the planet, and it is a different way to think about the vanish of an object. It's essentially a rebranding of a coin vanish. Now, as we go through, instead of thinking about the methodological process, really keep in mind the experience of the spectator. Really look at this objectively and think about what they are experiencing. Don't think about this as a sequence of moves or a coin vanish or anything like that. Just really try and think about what the spectator is experiencing, knowing that they know nothing about magic. Its extreme simplicity is the thing I love about it the most. So we'll go through this very, very slowly. It's also a slightly quirky effect. It feels surreal, and it feels far bigger than just making a coin vanish. So you start by saying to somebody, right, I'm going to show you something with the concept of time. And you basically allow them to see both hands empty, and you say, now at this moment, nothing is happening. In fact, would you do me a favor, and you close your hand, allowing it to be so clean that there's nothing there, and you just say, would you hold me on the wrist? And you're doing this, and we're going to go into a steel sequence in a moment that uses these moves. So it's important that you are affecting the same movements that you'll be doing in a minute. So with nothing in the hands, and talking about this moment of nothingness, you say to them, I want you to just hold me on the wrist. So right now, a spectator is now holding you on the wrist. You allow this hand to be seen empty, and you say, this particular moment of absolute nothingness, I want you to burn this into your mind and remember this moment. You leave it for just a few beats. And at this point, I mean, imagine a spectator has no concept. Maybe they might think something might appear at that moment. Maybe. But there's just nothing happening. So it's a very, very clear image for them to have in their mind. You leave it for a few beats, and then you say, right, okay. Take out a coin, and you place it in the hand. And you say, right, now we have something. We have something here. And the something in this case is a coin. Now, this doesn't have to be a coin. This could be a sweet or a pen lid or a USB stick. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be something from your pocket. It can be something on a table nearby. I've done this before with a sugar cube that was on a table. So it just has to be an object that you can either pick up from a table that's very close by or something from your pocket. Place this in the hand and you talk about this is somethingness. This is a something now that's in your hand. Then you allow it to be clearly seen there, close, and you say, just like you did before, just hold me deep on the wrist. And in that moment, you're going to steal that object, that coin, back into this hand. I'll go through that slowly so you can see what's happening. I close down, close my fingers around like this, turn the hand down. And they remember what to do because they did it in the first sequence at the very beginning. You say, come in, and you're moving this coin back to the base of the thumb. You come in and say, hold me on the wrist, and you do that hesitation thing where you gesture and then come in and you allow that to drop. Obviously not from that distance. You're much more covered. You come underneath, allow it to drop into the hand. It doesn't matter at all where that drops in the hand. It doesn't have to drop into any particular position. It just drops in a very soft, comfortable position in the hand as you then come to the wrist and say, just hold on tight there. You relax this hand and then you drop. Okay, very, very briefly again. Come in. Would you hold me on the wrist? Yep, just like you did before. And you steal that coin. As soon as they have held you on the wrist, you move the fingers slightly, just pop the knuckles, allow them to see that happen just a little bit. And what that will also do is move the tendons in your arm, which allows them to feel something happening. So now there's a real clear impression of that coin being there. And in that moment, you've dropped your right arm. And you drop it down to your side, but just allow it to swing. That's really important. It doesn't come down smoothly, it just drops. Now, if you've picked up an object off a table, I said I've done this with a sugar cube. If you've picked up an object off a table nearby, so you've done the whole nothingness, hold me on the wrist, great. Right, now let's use something. You pick up a sugar cube, put it in the hand, do the same thing, do the steel. As you relax, you can just put the sugar cube back on the table, or whatever object that is. If it's from the pocket, wherever the object came from, you put it back. So in this case, doing it with the coin, when they hold me on the wrist, I drop, and I just casually put my hand in my pocket for a second. As I say to them, what about if we could go back to that moment of nothingness, that moment where nothing was happening? If we could really go back to that moment, then I wouldn't be holding a coin. And the whole time I'm allowing this hand to be out in the open. Because this hand is out here, they will have missed this moment of this ditch. It doesn't feel like there's anywhere else for the coin to be apart from here, where they're holding. It doesn't feel like there's any space for a move or anything suspicious to be happening. See, if we could go back to that moment of nothingness, and you're essentially rebranding, you're not performing a vanish, you're just kind of going back to a point where nothing happened. I just love the idea of almost performing an effect where the effect is nothing happened. And it only has that effect because apparently something did. So when you're here, boom, relax, you ditch, and then all you do is you just slowly start building up those conditions, allow this hand to be seen empty, and slowly say, well then, if that's the case, I should be holding nothing. You come over like this, and you show like this. And then you can say, it's up to, sometimes I have shown the coin, or sometimes I wait for them to ask, but you can say, if that is the case, then there should just be the coin in my pocket. You know, it's just a trick with time. It's one of my favorite things to do. That's pocket time machine. And like I said, really think about the experience of the spectator or the person involved. Don't think about the fact that it's a move or it's a vanish sequence. Don't think of it that way. Really objectify the effect and start looking at what the spectator experience is. And I think you'll start discovering something very special that's entirely practical and can be done anywhere, anytime.